All right, we are live. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you today?
Excellent.
Awesome. I am so excited to have you here today to talk about this very important conversation. We're doing this series all week where we have a lot to talk about when it comes to educator burnout and really helping them. So excited. So, for those of you who are here, thank you for being here. I see we have a couple of people joining us. Awesome to have you here. Stay engaged in the conversation. We want to hear from you, your comments, your questions. Drop them in the comments, and we will absolutely address your questions and concerns or ideas. So, we wanted to have this candid conversation about educator mental health because there are so many out there who are just leaving the profession. And we're seeing a lot of burnout. I am seeing it in my practice. And Patrick and I have had really a front row seat witnessing all of this. And we wanted to take a second to really share with you what we're learning and what we're seeing, and maybe some suggestions on how to help our educators. So we're going to be doing this live stream series, 3 parts, Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week at noon Eastern Daylight Time. So you want to make sure you join us for part 2 and part 3. But Patrick, before we get started, just take a moment, introduce yourself to people who don't know who you are, and I'll do the same.
Sure. My name's Patrick Higgins. I am currently the Assistant Superintendent in Rockaway Township Schools. I'm also on the Board of Trustees of NJECC, which is an educational technology consortium. And I've been in education for over 20 years. I've been a teacher, I've been a coach, I've been a instructional designer, and now I'm an administrator for the last 13 or so years, working in curriculum, professional development, and assessment in all different areas there. And I come at this aspect, or this problem we're looking at with educator burnout, from the front lines, in a sense that I work with teachers every single day. Part of my job is changing the work that we do with kids and changing curriculum and changing programming, which in itself presents a lot of stress to teachers. And what Michelle and I have seen over the last several years is those small incremental changes that we've had forever in education, when new programs come in, are causing bigger and bigger rifts and bigger stress among educators. And that is alarming to us. And that's kind of where I approach this. And I want to make sure that when we are aiming at helping teachers become better at what they do and helping students learn in different ways, that we're not doing so in an environment that causes an amazing amount of stress. I think we need to be conscious of the types of stress we're putting on teachers and how we help them deal with it.
Yes. And for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Michelle Dickinson. I am a resilience coach. I am a resilience visionary. My goal and my purpose is really to help people recalibrate, recenter themselves through their daily practices and also addressing their mindset. I get to do this work every day, and it's a gift, truly. I come at this conversation from the lens of I have coached now probably close to 75 educators over the course of 20 months, probably more than that if I was to really think back. But so I come at this from the perspective where I have listened to hours and hours of what our educators are saying, what their greatest struggles are and their pain points. And I really am concerned as well. And I know that we can do better, and we can make a difference for sure. So today we're going to start by unpacking the current educator experience. We'll discuss strategies to help educators stay empowered in the environment that lack respect, autonomy, support, and purpose. They're all real concerns that have been raised to us by educators. So drop an emoji in the comment section if you agree that these are concerns that you have seen with whether it's your colleagues, yourself, your friends who are educators. We'd love to hear from you. So Patrick, we start off, could you paint a picture for us from the lens of the educator, like what their experience is, and just sort of set the tone for us in terms of what it looks like from their perspective?
So, firstly, what we always like to say is, when parents drop their kids off, or when they bring them to the bus stop, or the kids walk to school, and when the students leave their house, and parents entrust us in education with their child. We've always looked at that as that is the most important piece of someone's life, their child coming to school. And it's a huge responsibility that we as educators all bear. And that hasn't changed forever. That's nothing new. But what has changed over the last several years is, and Howard mentioned it in the comments there too, is there used to be, for many, many years in education, intellectual freedom and intellectual curiosity that could drive a lot of what we did. But the standards movement has kind of changed that, and for many reasons, it's a good thing. But also, what's occurred over the last several years, like schools have worked really hard, and teachers have worked really hard. If you think about the events that occurred since the pandemic, and teaching online and teaching in hybrid, what's occurred since then, though, is now these students are coming back to school, and or in some cases in K1, 2, these are kids that never had school, or missed a year of really formative social and emotional learning. And so what we look at now, or what we experience, is much higher levels of stress from the kids that enter the classroom. They may or may not have had appropriate socialization. They may or may not have had exposure to print and text that in the past they definitely have had before. So what we've really tried to do, or we're trying to do with our teachers, is help them understand how to regulate in those situations, or how to make sure that they themselves are in a really good place, and that they're centered and that they're grounded, so that they can handle all of these, new and unforeseen challenges that teachers are facing. We have situations where, in the districts I've worked in and the district I currently work in, where we have more and more students arriving every day, and typically students that are arriving mid-year. A lot of times, at least in my district, are students that have English as a second language, and so that's a whole other level of stress that's added to a teacher's plate. And that's a really difficult thing to handle and to deal with. And I know there's situations all over the country, where people do this on a daily basis, but that doesn't make it easy, and it doesn't make it something that we can just brush aside. We need to be able to support our educators with ways to really control themselves and control how they approach every single day. And I don't think we do that well. And I think the work that Michelle has been doing the last several years, and the work that she's been doing with my staff, has really helped so many of our teachers do that in many different ways.
Yeah, and when I think about, what my experience is when they come to me for the first time, I guess, to address, what I'm seeing in the burnout space, the key issues. Like, I can't tell you how many teachers reach out and we get on a call together and they're at their tipping point. Like, they are just emotionally exhausted. They've been plodding along and struggling with emotional drag, so to speak, but they're at the point where when they're talking to me, I feel like the major issue is overwhelm. They just don't know how to reclaim their footing, because it's almost like they're just taking bubble gum and putting it in the boat, in the hole in the boat, right? But it's still taking on water. It's like the only way I can really explain it. So that's really what I'm seeing. I'm seeing complete overwhelm, complete exhaustion, hopelessness. Some of them come to me and they say, I really want your support in helping me leave the profession. Like, help me figure out where I'm going to go, because I'm not staying here, tears coming down their face. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So a lack of empowerment and a hopelessness is really what the things are that I'm seeing when they come to me.
So also too, something you had said before, Michelle, that I wanted to mention in my last phrase there. You mentioned like the number of teachers wanting to leave the profession, and that is staggering. There's no doubt about that. But the other part about that, though, is teachers that maybe want to leave the profession but don't, but they're here and they're staying. And the toll that a lot of this stress and overwhelming tasks that they're given, um, the toll that takes on their performance in the classroom is amazing, and not in a good way. It's
Yeah.
really heavy, and they're not as good at what they're not as good at what they do as they used to be. And it's not for lack of ability. It's There's so
Right.
much put on them that they can't perform under those expectations. And I think it's a really big deal.
And I see them losing their footing because, like, I'll have a very seasoned teacher talk to me and question their capacity to teach. And I'm like, you've been teaching for 20 years. All of a sudden they've lost their confidence that they can actually do their job. And I just say to myself, wow, like, it really rocks them. And then I think about the energy they're bringing into the classroom, right? Like the energy we bring into a conversation, into an engagement with somebody, is so powerful. And so it's really it's remarkable to see and to hear their struggle. I mean, there's just no other way about it. um so Patrick, how one of the biggest things that I get is that environments are not perfect. Every school has a different dynamic, has a different culture, has a different vibe, has different energy going on, has different conflicts going on. So, like, how to stay empowered in environments that lack respect, autonomy, support, and purpose. What are your thoughts on that?
So one thing that I always tell teachers that I work with is, typically in the way that schools are, at least in the area where I am, administrators don't stay forever. Leaders don't stay in those positions forever. They move, fairly consistently. They may be there for 3 to 5 to 7 years, but then they move on. And what's most important about those situations is helping teachers develop a building culture. How does that building, what is the culture among the people that are going to be there for 20, 25 years? Like, how do you develop that? And I think there's been a lot of work done across multiple states in school climate and helping schools understand how to build culture. And that's really important. There's that, which I think is vital, is helping teachers and school communities learn how to do that.
Mhm.
But there's also the idea, and I think I heard it last year from a woman named Alicia De Lorenzo who spoke in my schools. She has this phrase, deregulated adults cannot handle deregulated children. So when we look at some of the situations that our teachers are put in, where kids, especially perhaps in extreme situations or special ed situations where students may have behavioral disorders or emotional disorders. If you are not, if the person in charge of that room doesn't come to that situation in a regulated state and in a controlled state, or they're bringing things from their home life or their personal life that are dragging them down or making them off center, handling a child that's not an adult, and has not had the experience of handling those situations, having a child like that in your possession, in your classroom, is really difficult to handle. And so that's something that we talk about all the time, is how do we center ourselves and how do we make sure that we are in control of every situation that we're put into. And it becomes more and more difficult with how overwhelming or how overwhelmed teachers feel. The other thing that we can think about too is this idea of the thermometer and the thermostat, where, Michelle, you say this all the time, where a thermometer, it simply reflects what's happening in the situation. So we look at those as indicators, but we want to really teach organizations how to be thermostats or act like thermostats, where they control what the temperature in each situation is. And that comes with practice, and that comes with intention, and then learning how to be good at recognizing situations and recognizing what my response to the situation should be.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to acknowledge and thank the folks who are here: Howard, Adam, HMG789. Thanks for being here. And we will get to your questions once we get through some of the key points that we want to really hit in our time today. So Patrick, one of the things that I feel like I need to mention is this concept that our teachers have around um, dwelling and living in the state of survival. I have so many teachers that come to me that are merely just trying to get through the school year. Like, literally, it's like trapeze from winter break to summer break, you know? It's literally a couple, I mean, how many people are counting down the days, right, to the end of school? How many people count down the days? I can't tell you, in some cases to retirement, right? Or until the next break. Survival mode seems to have become the norm. They don't know any different. But the reality is, what I've seen in working with these teachers is the moment you move them out of survival mode, then they get to create. You cannot create from a state of survival. We see this all the time. And so, it's really exciting when I'm talking to different teachers, and they're making these small incremental changes, and they're moving themselves out of survival into more of a in control scenario where they can actually start to create what they want for themselves. So, for me, I've seen so many of our educators struggling. They come into the Zoom room with me for their first or second session, and many of them are bursting into tears because they're just completely overwhelmed, and no one's really had a conversation about how they're really doing. They're holding it together for the most part. Um, and so what I try to do when I'm meeting with them is get them present to what are the things that matter to them. What are the things that they glean joy from? But it's hard to have those conversations when they're so external focused. Um, so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think too, this idea of working from a stress-centered environment, it really limits your creativity and your flow. And I mentioned before, so many teachers obviously wanting to leave the profession, but those that are staying are limited by a lot of the factors you talk about, that they're just getting by, or I think you and I have talked about this quite a bit. Your day happens to you
Yeah.
rather than you controlling the events in a day. And that sounds like really a simple thing. That sounds like something, oh, I could wake up today and map out my day and whatnot. And I think a lot of us and a lot of teachers start out with that intention, but then something throws it off. And then immediately when something throws it off, you go back to that fight or flight, that stress centered reactionary work. And that's not, you know, that never lets you be your best self, and never lets you bring your full self to the work that you're doing. And so I know from talking to you and from talking to teachers that have worked with you, that's really the work that's involved, is how do I make sure that I am intentional in how I start my day, and I'm intentional in how I finish my day. And if there's something in the middle there that throws it off, I have tools and I have strategies that I can recenter myself and refocus. Which again, it sounds like very, very simple work, but it's not. Your brain and that reaction to stress is really hardwired, and it wants to revert back to known and tried and true behaviors in response to stressors, even though that they may not be the right responses. They're the responses that your body thinks it needs to do. So I think, having conversations with teachers who have worked with you, like in those situations, they definitely feel that they can now step back, recenter, refocus, and approach the situation in a more healthy way.
Yeah, it's like you are either the plastic bag blowing in the wind at the effects of your life experience, or you get to create it. And I think that that's a really important point, because so many conversations that I start, um, where I'm asking, what's going on, it's all been external focused. Well, when they do this, when this changes, or when I finally da da da, it's never what I have control over right now in front of me. Like, it's easy to lose sight of that. And it's easy to just be like, well, they say that next year we're going to do this, so I'll just hang on. And it's like, no, like, in the face of what's going on, you actually need to make yourself a priority, because I'm thinking about the family life that's affected, the children, their own children that are affected. Like, get the impact of not taking care of yourself and just waiting for external circumstances to change, and not owning that yourself and taking care of yourself. So I think that that's one of the biggest and most important conversations to have with educators, in a world where there's nothing but constant change occurring and constant upset, and they're always having to ebb and flow to the changes that are being thrown at them, you
Mhm.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that has a knock-on effect, like you said, how you feel when you approach the work that you do, and if you're stressed and if you're overwhelmed and you're responding from like a survival mode, it has a knock-on effect on all the aspects of your life. Like you said, it affects your family life, it affects your physical state, and I think those are really vital things to think about as we work with teachers over the next few years. And just Michelle, I wanted to kind of
Mhm.
jump back into it also. So you use something, this resilience coaching method, and it's not really, it's not traditional. It's not like traditional professional development that teachers typically get. But I think in order to help everybody understand the type of work that you've done, we need to go back a little bit and talk about how we both started working together in this particular facet.
Yeah, yeah. It was a very interesting story. I'll give the shortened version. Um, I had reached out to you because I was doing resilience work when I first started my company. I was doing it for the corporate space, but I kept hearing from my friends that, teachers are struggling. Like, why are we not giving teachers attention? So I reached out to you and you said, yeah, come and do a professional development day. And so I did. And what we realized very quickly is that teachers are very private. Like they're not going to be sitting around a table with their colleagues talking about what really is the issue that they're struggling with, the imbalance in their life. So just out of my pure frustration, I just reached back out to you and I said, Patrick, I'm like, I gotta get this information into your teachers. So like let me meet with them one on one. And I never in a million years set out to be a coach ever. I set out to feed people what I knew they needed, which is they needed these resilient strategies to help themselves. And so that was when we began the first pilot to meet with them one on one and really see if there was an appetite for that.
Yeah, and I think too, from my perspective of delivering professional development over the last, 15 years or so, um, that's how we started. We started with, hey, let's get you in front of a group of 20 teachers on an in-service day and then talk about your methods. But as you said, it's nobody in front of their peers. It's very difficult when to find someone that wants to be that open and wants to really work on themselves in the company of 20 other people that they see on a daily basis. So that shift to the one-on-one coaching model was a big leap for us, as a district and as a leader. It was a different way to look at it, and it was after the pandemic. So there were, there's funding available for this. There's a big focus on mental health, and mostly it was student mental health, and this was a big step for us towards teacher mental health. And I really feel like we've seen the benefits of it.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at HMG 789 and the comment, many love the job, but not the increasing demands and burdens placed on them. I hear that all the time. Like, we were just talking about that, Patrick. I think that what we have to remember is the burdens are always going to be placed because everything is always changing. And how do we empower our teachers to take care of themselves so they come to the plate ready to deal with what's coming at them? I'm finding that teachers are completely depleted. So then you throw a curveball at them and they can't possibly handle that.
Mhm.
So it really does start with, we have to remind teachers they absolutely need to make their well-being and their self-care the number one thing.
And like I said before, it has a trickle down effect on everything else that's in your life.
Mhm.
Not just your work in the classroom and your work with students, but your relationships with your colleagues, your relationships with your family, your relationships with your friends in your life, your relationship towards your physical self as well. We've seen that in talking to people quite a bit, that there is a direct correlation between getting control of how you approach a day and being intentional and your physical health.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a really a nice factor that came out of this. And so when we moved to that one-to-one coaching model, we started to notice that there was an uptick in the amount of people that you worked with. Word of mouth spread about the benefits that people were finding from someone who was non-clinical. This is There's no stigma attached to mental health has various stigmas attached to it. One of them is the idea of you need to see a clinician or someone clinical, which I know we've talked, like in some cases that's recommended and like that's what you need to do. But in other cases it's not. And I think this is kind of a stigma-free approach that you provide.
Yeah, I think that that is why it is successful, because I come to this conversation in a very organic, authentic way where I have no problem sharing my own personal hurdles. Even though I'm not a teacher, I'm navigating life too. And I think that when there's a coach, it's a little bit less threatening, and I try really hard to have my clients feel comfortable so that they recognize it is a safe space for them to just share what they're dealing with, because when they're comfortable and they're willing to share, then I can actually make recommendations around different things that they can try to help themselves. I think we forget how we know all of the right things to do, but we forget, like our parents taught us, 8 hours of sleep, hydration, good diet, all of those things, but we forget because life is just gets crazy. So, it's the accountability piece too. I think a lot of people need someone to hold them to account. Like, okay, I'm going to do these things, and then when they do it consistently and they start to feel better, they start to recognize, wow, that really wasn't as hard as I thought. So it's
Yeah,
important.
and I think the accountability piece was another big one for us as well. So I make the joke with Michelle all the time, like, anybody can go to a gym and anyone can go and know what workouts to do and know that they need to spend, 45 minutes doing this particular exercise or this cardio thing. But the act of actually doing it and holding yourself accountable is not, is a lot of times where people get tripped up. And so having Michelle working with teachers and holding them accountable to see, okay, in the week I'll talk to you on this day, and then in 7 days I'm going to talk to you again. And so there's an accountability piece to it as well, saying, okay, what have you done? Like, how many steps have you taken? Where did you get hung up? And that again kind of helps people along. They know that they have somebody in there with them, a partner that's helping them through this and learn new behaviors.
Yeah, and the other thing I do want to mention is, based on all of the conversations that I've had, whether it be with the administrators, because I did coach administrators from a district, or the actual teachers. I've gleaned a lot of insight into what the most common areas are that they struggled with. And because of that, we developed our summer program. A lot of the common concerns include dealing with difficult people. Who is not dealing with a difficult person? So, like, we have a focus where we're going to talk only about dealing with difficult people, difficult parents, difficult peers, difficult students, difficult administrators, whatever the difficult person is. That financial burden, I can't tell you how many teachers are working multiple jobs, because we all know there needs to be better compensation, but a lot of them have responsibilities. So they're working multiple jobs. So, what's our relationship to finance? What's our relationship to money? So, that's going to be another powerful conversation. Home harmony. How many people come to me and complain and say, I am struggling with my personal relationships because of the amount of work I'm bringing home. I don't have a good relationship with my partner. My children, look at me as an educator, not as their parent. How do I be less of an educator and flip the switch and just be their parent? So there's that. I mean, so these are some of the most common things that we have heard. We have crammed into a summer program, and I just want to mention that because those are areas that we see need attention.
And also too, the idea of time, and many of the teachers that we talk to, they stress that they just, if we could give them one thing, it would be more time, or release them from certain responsibilities so they could have time to focus on the things that, like what like the things you were talking about, Michelle, and the things you work with them with, but even classroom preparation and things like that. So that's another focus we have this summer, is how we can leverage various tools out there and efficiency strategies to help people, essentially take your Sunday back. A lot of teachers spend a good chunk of their Sundays during the school year planning for the week. And we want to make sure we can give some of that time back. Like, how do we help teachers do that so that they can spend it with family and friends, and not being immersed in the stress of work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm excited to see, how many more lives we can touch, whether it be through the summer program or through this work. I think we need to keep having this conversation, just like Nicole said here. Like, we have to have these candid conversations, because if we don't, we're just going to slowly watch our educators leave the profession. The impact on our kids is going to be real. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to make a difference and help them feel better. And then the trickle down effect is that our kids get to benefit from healthier, more balanced people that get to teach them.
Yeah, and for me as an administrator, I want healthier schools. I want happier schools. I want schools to be a place where everybody wants to be. Everybody, from the kids and to the adults to the parents that come visit. You know, there's a whole movement in design and things like that that you should every aspect of your school should be inviting and should be making people feel good about being there. And the emotional and the climate in the building should be no different. It should be a place where everybody wants to be.
Absolutely. So, Patrick, we are doing part two on Wednesday.
Mhm.
Um, and our goal on Wednesday is what are we covering again? Remind me. What's part two? Part two is we're going to dive further into the data, I think.
Yep, and we're also going to talk about how working with difficult colleagues or difficult people, how you can, have this kind of unshakable resilience, regardless of the situation you find yourself in. How you can bring your best self to that and make the most of every situation like that.
Yes, exactly. Not let it rock your footing and your
Right.
confidence in what you do, because I see so many teachers that are so good at what they do, but yet they're just not feeling balanced. Therefore, insecurity shows up. So
Yep.
awesome. Well, thank you. I think this was a great first chat, and I look forward to doing part two and part three on Friday. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your comments and your feedback. And reach out if you have any additional questions. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to talk to you.
All right. See you soon, Patrick.
Bye bye.
Bye.